It's Wes. Welcome to this video. Today we're going to talk about the Fujifilm X mount lens, the 23mm f2 lens. My favorite lens, the best lens in the world, the best lens in the world. I thought that I heard an echo in there. It's kind of epic. Sit down, buckle up, and stay tuned because we're going to talk about the best lens out there in the X series system. All right. Enough talk. My name is Wes. I'm a freelance photographer in Southern California and I make YouTube videos about Canon and Fuji. And today I am delighted to share with you my experience, which has changed now that the X-H2S is out there. My mantra when talking about camera gears and camera tutorials is to talk about use, price, and performance for any piece of gear. So we're definitely going to talk about what to use this lens for, how it performs, and the price, which we'll come to at the very end. But right now we're going to talk about some of the features from the Fujifilm website. Number one thing you should know, this lens is compact. It's one of the smaller lenses Fuji offers. It's a walk-around prime. The silver, yes, I got the silver, XF 23mm f2 lens is weather resistant and it is versatile. The 35mm equivalent lens gives you an f2 max aperture, so you have portability and speed. It's light and bright, and the optical design features two spherical elements to reduce distortion and spherical aberrations in order to produce greater sharpness and accurate rendering. Just remember, it's sharp, it's bright, it's light. Now there's a super EBC coating that's also used to control flare and ghosting for improved contrast and color fidelity when working, especially in bright and backlit conditions. And complementing the optics is, we're going to talk about this later, a stepping motor along with an internal focusing design, and this gives you quick and quiet focusing performance. Well, that's not it. The lens is weather sealed, and so it is suited for any type of rough weather out there. So more about these features later. I dug around on the internet, I did a little bit of research, and I found a site, Fun with Fuji, where a photographer, Monica, is a writer and editor, and she discusses this lens and its merits. She says, what's good about the lens? It's the focal length. It's also the autofocus, it's the price, it's the size, it's the image quality, and you get bokeh. Yeah, you get bokeh, that precious elixir of the photographic gods that separates the subject from the background, the depth of field bliss. Oh, but you know, I'm getting off the point there. Sorry, back to the video. Let's talk about focal length. This is a prime, no pun intended, consideration. We can always make do, and we adapt focal lengths for novel purposes, but it helps ask yourself, am I shooting a subject that requires a wide field of view or something that requires a telephoto field of view? The 23mm is right in between. It's a sweet spot. Some would say it's an ordinary spot in the focal ranges, but for me, it captures life and it excels at giving you a sense of place and a space. I've heard the 50mm is nearer to what the human eye sees in terms of a focal range. I like just a little bit wider, a little more context, a little more environment on that perspective. This focal length is my favorite. The 23mm on the APS-C system is a 35mm equivalent on the full frame. In fact, let's talk about some of the other features. The autofocus of the 23mm f2 is even better than the 35mm f2, which received a lot of praise for its autofocus when it was originally released. It's so quick and silent, you don't even know it's focusing and that it's honed in on your subject with sharpness. The mechanism is totally internal, so there's no external moving part of the lens when it's focusing. The autofocus is silent, and this makes it a good lens for video. However, in my experience, what I found through the search of all the lenses in the X mount system is lenses that are awesome for photography, they perform decently on video until you needed eye autofocus for a talking head video. And so this is a distinction I want to draw, and so we're going to talk about why the X-H2S changed everything. I loved this lens for the reasons that Monica on the Fun with Fuji website loves it, but I didn't love it for the talking head video. So, you know, I have a YouTube channel, I make videos where I talk about camera gear, and so I need a lens that's gonna be sharp and all the things the X series lenses offer, but I really needed something that could track and stay in focus for a talking head. Back to Canon for a second. In the RF system, the RF 35mm is my favorite lens. It's an f1.8. I love the dreamy soft backgrounds I get with that lens. And that autofocus is dead on, never fails. Amazing system. But on the Fuji, in my favorite focal length for talking head videos, I just found it lacking until the X-H2S. This really shines. The autofocus system in the camera pairs with this lens and it really resurrects this capability for video. And now I have a new favorite lens for video. In the past, the 18-55 has been my go-to for filming videos. That was a suggestion of Patrick Tomaso. We were talking on Twitter, and he mentioned that you had to have particular lenses to get that nice, snappy autofocus for talking head videos. He said the 18-55 was the way to go. It was a surefire way to film talking head videos when I used the XE4 or the X-T4, but honestly, it was more of a utilitarian lens. I never really thought what it created was a unique look. It's an f2.8 to f4, and that focal range or that aperture range is serviceable, but it just didn't stick in my imagination the way the f2 23mm lens did. Now, I also don't know the relationship between the X100V, which has a fixed focal length of 23mm and came out around the same time as this X-mount 23mm lens. But they seem to be cut from the same cloth and they seem to share the same characteristics. I would say they're the same lens, but I know that's just obviously not the case because the X100V is more of a pancake style lens. Form factor of the 23mm f2 X-mount lens sticks out more and it juts out from the camera body, which makes it more difficult to take the camera into a small sling bag or definitely not a pocket. But the X100V, you can have it in a pocket. Now, all this to say it's an amazing lens, like I've said. I would say you're gonna use it for, travel, street, things like that, types of photography. But let's talk about price. So at $449, this lens is the best value in the X-mount lineup, period. That's it, that's all there is to it. $449, it's light, it's bright, and it performs on video. That's just me speaking. My preference is on the documentary side. I like to see the context of the subject. I'd like to see the environment. Though rendered with some soft bokeh and separation from the background. I'm not probably gonna reach for a 56mm APS-C lens or like an 85 equivalent f1.4 lens, unless I'm shooting exclusively portraits that day or I have just a portrait session to shoot. I'm gonna get something a little bit wider. That's just me. Now on the site Fun with Fuji, she compares the f2 23mm to the f1.4 23mm, and she says that the 23mm f2 is the winner if you're gonna be traveling, shooting street photography, or want an everyday lens. And I quite agree. And I double down on that if you're filming talking head videos with your X-H2S. It's amazing. Let's run over some more of the details from the Fujifilm website. So this is a prime wide-angle lens designed for the APS-C format Fujifilm X-mount mirrorless cameras, and it gives you a 35mm equivalent focal length. It's a bright f2 maximum aperture, and so that gives you benefits working in difficult lighting conditions, and it also offers greater control over depth of field. And we already talked about how the lens design helps you limit distortion and spherical aberration, so it's sharp. We talked about the EBC coating. So the stepping motor, along with the internal focusing design, is really important to give you fast, quiet autofocus that's good for still photography and videos as well. Now the lens body has weather sealing to protect against dust and moisture, so you can even shoot in environments as cold as 14 degrees Fahrenheit, which is super freezing. All right, the focal length is 23mm. It's a maximum aperture of f2, a minimum aperture of f16. The lens mount is the Fujifilm X. Lens format coverage is the APS-C. The angle of view is 63.4 degrees. The minimum focusing distance I think is interesting, 8.6 inches. So the X100V is about 6 inches or so. This is close to that, but it requires a little more space. Focus type, this is an autofocus lens. It is not stabilized, and the filter size is 43 millimeters. So this lens is like 2.3 inches by 2 inches, so it's a tiny, tiny lens. It weighs 6.35 ounces. So back to my mantra of use, performance, and price. I love this as an everyday lens, a travel lens, a street photography lens. But today, because of the excellent autofocus of the Fuji X-H2S, I love this as a video lens. Yep, talking head, subject tracking, eye autofocus lens. And I've been filming on it the whole time. It performs well. And at $449, it's a steal. It could be the only lens I ever use. That's true. Take that to the bank, or go to the bank and get the money to buy this. You're a beautiful person and a good person. And if no one has told you that today, let me be the first person to tell you that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. And more than that, go into the comments and tell me what you're taking pictures with and what you're filming with. And I'd love to hear from you. I'll see you in the next video.